And I think we're live. And we actually didn't bother with an intro for this one. So, hey everybody, this is Roberto Blake helping you create something awesome today. Today is a live stream. We're doing kind of a community live stream. We haven't done one of these in a while. And the reason is that we are in the midst of the beginnings of the 2019 YouTube Adpocalypse, which is when you have a mass advertiser boycott. Now, for those of you who are watching the stream, please go ahead and share it in Twitter, Facebook, wherever you want to share it, to kind of like, obviously help the channel get some attention and also bring more people to the conversation. I haven't done a live stream in a while because my plan was to overhaul my entire live stream system. You guys might notice that I'm actually on a DSLR instead of a webcam because there's a little uptick in quality. I still have both webcams running and I wanted to do new graphics, a whole new thing. But let's talk about what's going on with this ad boycott situation, this Adpocalypse 5.0. We've had advertiser boycotts in the past. We've had 4 primary issues we refer to as the adpocalypse that either were the ad boycotts themselves or negative repercussions of the ad boycotts on the platform. The first one, and obvious one, being the ads that were pulled due to violence and inappropriate things in terms of hate crimes and extremist recruiting and things of that nature got advertisers' attention. The second adpocalypse was not an ad boycott itself so much as the mass demonetization of channels. And then some of you, of course, remember one that affects the YouTube Kids app, referred to as ElsaGate. So we've had adpocalypse boycott situations before, many times since I would just say probably like 2016, 2017. We've, as a community, faced this before. All of that being said, this is somewhat different. This is very different for many, many reasons. And I just kind of wanted to, one, respond to some of the conversation that you guys are having, but I also wanted to put some of my own thoughts in the record, and I didn't want to edit for that or anything of that nature. I just kind of wanted to put these things out there. So here's kind of my thoughts. For those of you who don't know, the reason that there's another mass advertiser boycott is because of the concerns of child exploitation on the platform and how very unsavory individuals use videos, whether they're videos that are supposed to be completely harmless, things that could be family friendly, things from family vloggers, things from individual teenagers uploading. But there are many troubling instances of the comment sections and unlisted videos with timestamps and things of that nature surfacing around some of this content. And then there is the issue of the recommendations in the recommendation system of the YouTube algorithm. Now, someone specifically brought this to light, and I'm going to try to pull up some information around this using some articles that I have queued up here on the computer, and I'm going to try and share them here on my screen. But YouTube is, acting to combat this situation. So let's just bring up my screen here. All right, so YouTube terminates more than 400 channels following child exploitation controversy. So this is an article from The Verge by Julia Alexander. I think she has a great take on this. She's written a couple of articles about this situation. Philip DeFranco has addressed this in a video. There were other things in that video, so you'd have to kind of move around for it. But ultimately, there's a situation where things as innocuous as a bikini haul, completely benign content, family-friendly content, but the comments are horrible around this. And then there are things where you have people targeting children, and the response to this has been that advertisers are pulling their ads from the YouTube system. Now, part of this is in response to a video from a very specific YouTuber, Matt Watson. I'm not sure you can call him a YouTuber. He doesn't want to identify as a YouTuber, so fine. Now, he has a few videos on this particular subject out on his channel, but the interesting thing is he's also, and there are other people bringing this up, and I'm not going after him as much as a lot of people are going after him. I'm just pointing out that they are bringing up a valid point in being concerned or suspicious as to a motive because he's privated about roughly 200 plus videos on his channel, which means he doesn't want people looking into his previous content or his past. Now, I think an argument could be made, well, maybe he only wants attention on this issue, but I don't necessarily know if I agree with that argument, because why would you private 200 videos and only leave the videos about this up? That somehow doesn't seem to make sense, but someone could argue that point. But this is a direct response to a campaign that he's using to bring awareness to this, which, by the way, kudos for bringing awareness to a horrible issue within the platform. We had people bring up the ElsaGate issue, and that was a good thing, and YouTube cleaned up the YouTube Kids app, and they got rid of a bunch of channels that were masquerading as family-friendly content that were wildly inappropriate. And they got those things off the platform. And YouTube's even aggressively now removing things in the platform. They've been moving fast, they've been moving responsibly, and they're doing everything they can to address this issue. But the issue that most YouTubers take with Matt Watson is that he specifically is demanding and calling for people to target the advertisers on YouTube and puts contact information in the descriptions of the video and specifically wants them to boycott the platform and wants YouTube content creators to boycott the platform. And people take issue with that for many different reasons. Now, I think the first and most obvious one is that when somebody does something like that, you have to question what their motive was. If the issue was to bring awareness to this, you can bring awareness directly to YouTube, and even someone like Keemstar, host of Drama Alert, brought up that we could bring this to YouTube's attention, and YouTube wants to fix this problem. What's the point of specifically raising the hackles of the advertisers? That punishes content creators more than anybody. YouTube is a multi-billion-dollar company. Google's a multi-billion-dollar company. They will be fine from a financial standpoint, even with a loss of revenue. And the advertisers, those budgets don't go away. They will get exposure somewhere else. A friend of mine on Twitter brought this up, that the advertisers will put their budget elsewhere. I agree. I've said that as well. So who gets hurt in this situation? It's the content creators who make a living on YouTube with their ad revenue. Now, in full disclosure, I make about $3,000 to $5,000 a month on average on YouTube. I think last year I did about $40,000 in ad revenue. I think this year I'm going to exceed that with the sponsorships I've done, and that I have in place and that I've booked. I obviously do very well with my business, Awesome Creator Academy, and I do massively well on affiliate marketing. YouTube AdSense going away is going to represent 18% or so of my income maximum if YouTube ads for me went to zero, but they won't. The last times YouTube had an advertiser boycott, it didn't really impact me. I think I actually made more money during the Adpocalypse than not. So my horse in this race, my skin in the game, has nothing to do with protecting my own wallet. I don't have a horse in that race in terms of if YouTube ads go away tomorrow, I would disproportionately probably benefit from YouTube ads going away tomorrow because I don't use them to sustain my business. And I could specifically leverage YouTube. Actually, the part that would hurt me is buying ads. If YouTube ads went away and I couldn't buy ads, that might be bad for me because of something I have planned with buying ads for product sales, right? But I won't be negatively impacted by another adpocalypse directly when it comes to the ad revenue. And I'm just saying that not to brag and not to throw anyone under the bus. I'm saying that to put on the record that I don't have an agenda. I don't have an agenda other than, well, what about other content creators who aren't me? What about content creators that rely on YouTube for 30% of their income, 50% of their income, 60% of their income, 90% of their income? My concern becomes to those people because of a simple fact. Those people did nothing wrong. Those people did nothing wrong, and yet they would be punished in a scenario where advertising on YouTube decreases, there's less ads to go around, less inventory, that negatively impacts them. Those people don't deserve a 10, 20, 30, or 50% loss in revenue, having done nothing wrong themselves. So I don't think that is fair. And if you specifically decide to target advertisers and encourage people to boycott and encourage people to directly contact the sponsors, and if you directly facilitate that, then I feel that that is wrong. I'm just going to say it. I personally feel that's wrong, and I feel that that is someone who has a vendetta against YouTube for one reason or another. We know that there was a content creator, unfortunately, that went to YouTube headquarters last year and was a shooter. So we know that there are people who have grievances with YouTube that have been not successful previously in the platform, don't want to be YouTubers anymore, and they want to specifically attack YouTube as a company. And they don't care about any collateral damage that happens in the process. We know that there are entities like that, whether they be disgruntled content creators or whether it is the media that might have a direct competition with YouTube for ad dollars and would benefit from an adpocalypse. What happens in an adpocalypse? Advertiser money is moved out of YouTube and has to go elsewhere. That means that that money is freed up for other platforms, which means competitors of YouTube and traditional media might benefit from that. So by having a negative narrative around this and making YouTube more accountable than the individuals, the horrible individuals that are using a system to exploit children, that and shifting the blame and responsibility to the platform and then punishing the creators seems unreasonable, instead of holding the people responsible accountable. And so that's something I take issue with. And when you look at who are the stakeholders here, well, Matt is benefiting from the attention, and he's been talked about and had his name in the New York Times and all of these media outlets. And again, good for bringing awareness to this issue, but the execution of it and your motives become debatable. And if he himself didn't believe that to be true, why private 200 plus videos? I can't imagine that if I had a viral YouTube video and I genuinely believed I was doing the right thing, I can't imagine that I would keep people from looking into my past unless there was something there that is a problem or that I don't want being brought to light. If I'm bringing something to light, then everything that I've put out on the internet would technically be fair game, knowing that if there's something negative, then obviously someone would take the steps to bury it. And I understand that, and that's fine until you question intent, because that makes you less credible. At least that's my opinion, that's my perspective on it, is that if it's out there, it's out there. And again, I'm not trying to go after this guy. I'm just pointing out that that's why somebody like Keemstar or Philip DeFranco might question this. And then as for the idea that, well, YouTubers are moving to protect their own interest in their wallet, of course they are. Whether you're an employee or a contractor, if the means by which you make a livelihood is compromised by actions that were not your own, you would probably move in a defensive way or in a protective way, or feel that you're being wronged. I think that's a natural inclination for those content creators to have, and I can sympathize with that. But, these are on the record some of my thoughts here. Let's go ahead and pull up some of your thoughts, and let's have somewhat of a discussion around this. So, that boy Rodney says, if YouTube ads go away, so will the quality of y'all's favorite YouTubers, because they won't upload if they're not getting paid. That's a fair point, Rodney, and that's why some people are definitely concerned. Now, there are other people who aren't concerned and feel like, well, YouTubers should get real jobs, or like that's what they get, or which is unfair. That's unreasonable. That would be like saying that about anybody else's working profession. If a plant goes down and someone's like, oh, well, that's not necessarily, that person didn't do anything wrong. So I definitely sympathize with content creators. I've always said diversify. And so to speak to what should content creators do, well, you can't control ad revenue. So I've always said, well, if you can't control ad revenue, don't rely on it. But I know that's easier said than done, depending on what your niche is, what your content is, what your genre is. So, I can definitely appreciate that there are people who just are on YouTube ads because they aren't business savvy enough yet to develop another outlet. Team Autism Pedia, thank you. Yeah, I really dig Mr. Beast's merch. Jimmy's awesome. Sailor Drew says, Roberto, can you really do a brief summary because of what you're covering? Because I came in a little late. I kind of get it, but I still am a little lost. All right, so the TLDR, the recap is that this person, Matt Watson, found a issue within YouTube wherein there's a combination of the fact that there are videos that are harmless that are being leveraged by unsavory people in terms of child exploitation, where someone might be doing a bikini haul or a family might be at the beach, but then they're time stamping in comments and in playlists and things of that nature, places where a child might be in a compromising situation or something of that nature, something truly disgusting. And so Matt Watson brought attention to this, but with a twist. He specifically wanted anyone who becomes aware of this to not specifically, hey, reach out to YouTube. He wanted them to reach out to the advertisers and get them to be aware of this and to pull advertising, which of course hurts YouTube content creators. You pull advertising, the advertisers will eventually come back. YouTube can play the long game. YouTube operated at a loss for years. Google can subsidize YouTube at a loss. They don't want to, but they will, and they will inevitably survive if they have to. But there are content creators who can't take a 20% dip in revenue indefinitely as a negative consequence of YouTube. And the last time that there was an adpocalypse that also triggered more aggressive artificial intelligence on YouTube's side for monetizing and demonetizing content, those yellow dollar signs for demonetization that everyone has complained about, has everything to do with the fact that the algorithm became much more aggressive in vetting content directly in a response to advertiser concerns about ads running on hate speech and ads running on extremist content. And then later, there was a purge of YouTube channels that were supposed to be family-friendly content, but were not, that were disgusting and framed as for children, but were certainly not. And so that happened. So we've had issues with YouTube, with people exploiting YouTube. But the narrative as presented by Matt Watson is that YouTube is facilitating this versus YouTube is being abused by these people, which is... And again, if you have a negative agenda toward YouTube, words are a choice. Words are a choice. So to say that YouTube facilitates child exploitation is very different than to say that child predators are exploiting YouTube. That's shifting responsibility. That is a narrative choice. And that is a narrative choice that not only that Matthew made, but that the media is choosing to make. And words matter. So if you decide to say YouTube is facilitating child exploitation versus that child predators are exploiting YouTube, that is a specific choice in how you want to frame the narrative and who you want to assign blame and responsibility to. So again, words are a choice, and they've chosen their narrative. And their narrative then makes us have to question, what do they have to gain? Matt has gained massive media attention, has been featured in New York Times, Verge, BuzzFeed, all of these articles. I was reached out to by reporters around this issue, and I gave my 2 cents. And so I'm also going on the record here with you guys so that my stance is never taken out of context on this. So we could bring light to truly horrible, evil people on the internet and simultaneously not decide, let's go after the advertisers as if that's going to make things better, because YouTube now could deploy all their resources at just fixing the issue, but now they have to simultaneously reassure advertisers. And while I understand there are different departments of YouTube who can do that, this is an all hands on deck situation. And so I don't agree with that. So that's kind of where, I stand on this. And here's the other issue. If you make family-friendly content and there's like a scene that child predators decide to bookmark on your family vacation or your Disneyland trip or your bikini haul, that's not your fault. Your content shouldn't be demonetized just because somebody else is being evil in your comment section. Why should a YouTuber be punished for the behavior of a viewer? That seems unreasonable as well. Now, to speak to the advertisers, if you have the media or people on the internet making a narrative that YouTube is facilitating child exploitation, you don't want to be associated with that. But here's the problem. Almost no reasonable person actually believes that a brand like Disney or McDonald's is in favor of anything harmful to children and would not support that, whether an ad appears on a video where there are creepers or not. No reasonable person would believe that, and no reasonable person would hold it against the brand. But it's still a bad look for the brand to be associated with the headline, and it's a better look for them to say, we took a stand. The internet culture would call that virtue signaling. I don't know if I would go that far, but people within the internet culture have said that. Here's what I would probably do as an actually, I am an advertiser because I buy ads through the Google system. I'm not pulling my ads from Google, and I'm certainly not pulling my ads from YouTube. In fact, here's how I would benefit from an adpocalypse situation. Let's be very real about this. Here's how I would benefit. If this situation exacerbates and advertising gets cheaper, then every dollar I spend gets me more attention, and it also means if there's less inventory to compete, then I get more reach and leverage when I buy ads. So if anybody competing with me pulls their advertising, I'm going to benefit at a lower price and more exposure and absorbing their market share. So I win in an adpocalypse for those reasons. My content is not controversial. The last time the adpocalypse happened and demonetization went rampant, I assume that I benefited just because there was less inventory that was a safe harbor for advertisers that they were sure of, and I think that my ad revenue increased as a result of that. That's somewhat speculative on my part, but I have my own data to go off of and my own reasons for believing that, so I win again. And also, in an adpocalypse situation, if ad revenue went down, it's a justification in the eyes of my audience to forgive me if I do more brand deals, which pay better anyway. And it makes my audience, if they want to support me, you guys, my audience, would support me and say, hey, if Roberto's not getting ad revenue, but he's uploading like almost every day, we want to support him. Maybe we buy the YouTube starter kit, or maybe we buy his video course, or maybe we buy the merchandise. Or what have you, or donate on Patreon or whatever it is. So, again, I win. And I'm not saying that smugly. I'm pointing out that I have strategically insulated myself from YouTube's advertising system as something I rely on, specifically because it is vulnerable to the market of public opinion and the court of public opinion, which the court of public opinion will punish YouTubers whether they did anything wrong or not, as we are seeing now. So I always encourage you guys, and the reason that my channel is not a YouTube tips channel, the reason my channel is a channel focused on entrepreneurship for creatives, and that being an influencer is a version of that, is that at the end of the day, if you need to make an income and you're over leveraged and over dependent on any one social media platform, it could be game over very easily. So I always encourage you to build other revenue streams. I teach you how I did it, and I teach you how to protect your income and money, and that comes down to control. You don't control the YouTube algorithm and platform. You can't influence and control the advertisers in a positive way for the most part, and you ultimately are somewhat at the mercy of the viewers and how they behave, whether that's watching your videos or whether that's respecting the videos and not being creeps on these child videos. So if you're at the mercy of viewers behaving and supporting you, advertisers aligning with you, and the algorithm and platform favoring you, that's a lot of not having control. So I don't interpret being a full-time YouTuber as freedom as much as I interpret it as an opportunity. So some people are saying that what about actually the issue and bringing them up. Dose of Dad is the perfect person to respond to this, and what he says is this: it's not a platform problem, it's a people problem. This guy is getting 15 minutes of fame, and 30 days from now, nobody will remember his name. 180 days from now, most will have forgotten this happened. Maybe not. It depends on the impact that it has, but I agree with you that it's not a platform problem as much as it is a people problem. People are using YouTube inappropriately. YouTube is trying to do something about that and has awareness of it, but what they're trying to do in a way that doesn't unnecessarily punish people who are innocent and who had nothing to do with this. What Matt is doing would seem noble on the surface to someone like me, and I'm just quoting myself from Twitter as I said that this doesn't feel like a noble crusade, this feels like a vendetta, this feels like a gotcha moment. And I said that because if I had discovered this particular problem, I specifically would have reached out to YouTube. I would have reached out to Philip DeFranco. I would have reached out to YouTube commentators like Keemstar, and I would have said, I brought the attention to YouTube. I wouldn't have swept it out of under the rug or said, oh, let's hide this. I would have said, this isn't an advertiser problem as much as this is a problem with YouTube trying to rein in how its system is being exploited by unsavory people. And they've dealt with those problems before. They've dealt with extremist people. They've dealt with conspiracy theories and the anti-vaxxing thing, the hate crimes, and they're continuing to try to do that. And it's not a perfect system. I think most people are refusing to respect and accept that it's a system that 2 billion people a day use, and that 50 million people a day upload to, and that you have 400 hours of video uploaded every minute of every day. It is an almost unreasonable, unprecedented problem from a logistic standpoint in all of human creation. I don't think you could have fathomed building such a complex problem. And I don't think that people respect that it's a hard thing to solve. Sailor Drew says, this also makes sense as to why you were pointing out that he had 200 videos privatized. It just, for me, I'm like, what was it that would make you do that if you got all of this attention? Because I don't think that, like, if I went viral tomorrow, there's nothing on the, like, the only things that I've ever privated or unlisted on this channel, because there's 1,400 videos I've ever uploaded, and I think 200 of them are unlisted or private. There were videos that were unlisted live streams because of the algorithm. There are videos that are unlisted because they were for Patreon or for my community newsletter or a membership group that's behind a paywall. And there are videos that I unlisted because the information is so outdated as to be misinformation that I don't want people to still use since it's out of date. Because that'd be irresponsible. And the only other stuff I unlisted was stuff that was off-brand, in the sense of back in the day, it was business Monday through Friday, and then on the weekends I'd do movie reviews, and that just doesn't serve any purpose to be on the channel anymore, so I kind of incrementally unlisted those videos. But I can't imagine a scenario where I would go from 200 videos or whatever to 8 videos unless there was something I just didn't want the media to pick up on. And that's just, again, my thought process on that. I don't know. I'm speculating, but that's my thought process. And it just makes me question someone's motive and intent with regard to that. So I don't trust that. I don't trust that. Because let's say Philip DeFranco or Keemstar had exposed this issue, they wouldn't have gone back and hidden any of their videos. And there are people that I can't imagine anyone I personally know exposing this and then hiding their other content. That's troubling to me to like reconcile, because I don't understand, and I haven't talked to the guy, so I wouldn't know, but it just, something feels wrong. But that aside, that part of it aside, the other thing I don't trust is, if you want YouTube to fix this, and he says he doesn't want to be a YouTuber and he doesn't even want to use YouTube, he's very negative about YouTube as a platform. He doesn't say anything really favorable about YouTube as a platform. I think the only reason he's saying, oh, well, it sucks that creators are going to get hurt or whatever, he didn't have that attitude when he talked to Keemstar. But, like, it seems that maybe some harassment or some people calling him out might be the only reason he's addressing that. So I don't fully believe that makes me, again, the information that he brought up is good. I just don't agree with his call to action, and I don't trust the motive. That being said, I don't think the motive diminishes the issue. I think that the issue he brought up is a valid one. I'm happy that it's gotten light, and I'm happy that YouTube is addressing it. But YouTube also is addressing it, and he's suggesting that YouTube doesn't care about this. YouTube's always cared about this. And the fact that they, and let's bring it up here on screen, the fact that YouTube terminated more than 400 channels around this, you know, and the fact that this is something we've kind of seen a version of this before, like, the fact that they're doing something about it speaks volumes. And a YouTube spokesperson has said that it's taken it, very seriously. It's aggressive, and that they've even brought in child developmental specialists, former prosecutors from the FBI and CIA, and that, so they're even dealing with the authorities. If you wanted to bring light to this issue, why tell people to contact advertisers instead of telling them to contact the FBI? If I was going to have a call to action, I would have listed every governmental agency and every law enforcement agency in the description of my video. When you're talking about minors, I would have every one of those agencies and child protective services and all of those things, not McDonald's and Disney and whatever. Why would you get advertisers involved when this is an issue for the authorities and this is an issue for the platform? What are advertisers going to do that's going to affect positive change? Advertisers don't have any power to affect positive change in this situation. They can only do net negative damage to people who aren't even responsible. So that is where I don't feel that this guy is some champion, some hero of justice. I don't believe that, Matt Watson is a hero of justice. I think that he's somebody who gets to wear the mask of a hero of justice while acting on a vendetta and to leverage attention for himself around this issue. But that's just my personal opinion. And again, I don't know the gentleman. I haven't spoken with him. And that's an assertion and a judgment I'm making on my own based on the evidence that I have, and that's what I'm, taking away from this. I have the complete ability to be wrong about that, and if somehow I'm proven wrong about that, happy to admit it, But I don't see anything that gives me evidence to the contrary. If those 200 videos were up, I could probably get a better sense of his character, because initially I assumed he was doing a good thing, and then in looking into it and thinking about it, I was like, wait a minute, something feels off here. And why would you do this? Would I do this in this situation? Would anyone I know do this in this situation? And then in asking and talking to other content creators about, well, what would they do? And I talked to people with 100 subscribers, 1,000 subscribers, 1 million subscribers about this issue. I talked to content creators on all levels, and we mostly came to a consensus that this is not how we would have done it. Now, that in itself is fine. Everyone has a different approach, but when so many of us are like, well, we would have done this completely differently, and we ask the question, what's the value of alerting the advertisers? What's the point of that? Who benefits? Who gets hurt? The answers become very obvious and telling. The only people that get net negative damage, YouTube can take a loss. Content creators may not be able to sustain a loss. He gets the benefit of attention. The mainstream media gets a lot of clicks for this. And They get to frame a narrative around YouTube however they want, positively or negatively, the same way he made a choice, and they get the net benefit from it. I mean, The Verge is doing an even-handed take on this, but look, The Verge has ads running. And if I'm looking, these are Google ads. Google is the parent company of YouTube. At least I think these are Google ads. They might be specific placements, but other places are running Google ads on this and getting whatever. But the fact that any media company can run ads and benefit from this story, and yet YouTube creators will probably suffer demonetization or a loss of revenue around this. It's in their best interest to run this through a news cycle. It's in Matt's best interest to keep gaining notoriety and attention from this from as long as possible, and who knows what he does with that attention. So those are the winners. Who are the losers? YouTube is a platform and company, and the content creators who had nothing to do with this. The best way to have handled this, in my opinion, would have been to put the responsibility in the framing of the narrative on the horrible garbage human beings that look to use any internet tool they can to harm or exploit children. That's my opinion. That's what I think is wrong. I think that weaponizing social media, weaponizing artificial intelligence is a reality of the 21st century. It's a reality of the 21st century. Now, someone brought up a point that advertisers deserve to know. Advertisers deserve to know, but the media would have picked up on this on their own, and to specifically tell people or make people feel it's their duty to inform the advertisers, I don't agree with that. It's not that advertisers should be kept in the dark about this. It's a matter of the specific choice to specifically go after the advertisers and to leverage them is something that you can't call a pure motive. You cannot call that a pure motive. Andrew Can says, I see the advertisers lose too. No one wants this. He and old school media seem to like it a lot. Our Time says, maybe it's YouTube's excuse to lower AdSense payments and Google ad payouts to stimulate a loss to create that excuse. No, Our Time, that's not how ads work. I know a lot of small YouTubers and small content creators want to believe that YouTube wants to screw content creators out of AdSense. That's not true. It's a 55-45 split, but it's off the top. If ads don't come in, there's no money to split. So that's a cut off your nose to spite your face situation. That's problematic. If YouTubers don't bring in ad money against the inventory, YouTube loses. So, and Uncle Dan, The Verge is actually more on the content creator side on this one. They're dealing with it very even-handedly. I like what Julia Alexander has done. She's written a lot of good articles about this. So she's very even-handed, but more in favor of the creators in this. This isn't The Verge attacking YouTube. They're actually on the right side of this, believe it or not. So, but my issue is this, so if ads, the advertisers lose also in the sense that in YouTube and Google, they're probably, if they wouldn't be there if they weren't getting good bang for the buck. If you have to move your ad budget that you allocated to something somewhere else, one, if you're a marketing manager, changing all the plans you had this quarter for YouTube advertising is a nightmare for you if you're in that job. Because now you have to go through new spreadsheets, you have to do a whole thing, and you didn't ask for that. And then for the brand, they may not get the bang for the buck out of what they paid for. So if you were working, if any of you are working and you were at the job and you were an advertising manager, if you were an advertising manager for a brand, and then this happened, and you were said, hey, I know you're supposed to clock out, but you're going to have to stay here for another 4 hours because we have to completely move all of our ad inventory out of YouTube and Google. If you are a middle manager at a marketing position, that sucks for you. And then you also as the brand are like, we have to move this money like at the drop of a dime and not make a real plan, and we're probably not going to get the most out of this money because we had a plan for getting the most out of this money, and now we're moving on to our plan B. So if you're a business owner, that sucks to go with your plan B versus your plan A. So the advertiser gets screwed too. And it's not about like even that they themselves really even want to pull their ads. It's that they'll be shamed by the media to some extent if they don't, or they'll be questioned about it, or it looks bad for them to be aligned with bad press. And the thing is, they lose either way. They lose either way. So think about it. So this is, so this is not good for anybody. This is not good for anybody. I don't even think it's good for Matt Watson because, rightly or wrongly, he's attracted the ire and the contempt of most of the YouTube community and almost all of the commentary community and the drama community is going to be, looking into him and digging through his stuff, and that's already happening, which is probably why he did private those videos. But if there was nothing to worry about, why do it? But like this attention, the negative attention of people from the internet whose livelihoods are at stake, that's not good for him as a somewhat normal person, not a full-time YouTuber, not a YouTuber in long standing. This is not good for him. When Eric Feinberg, who had originally weaponized the media in the first Adpocalypse, Eric Feinberg had an issue where he was basically going to try to patent troll Google. And when people realized that he was the one who specifically went to the advertisers and to the media and brought up the ads running on extremist and controversial content, which by itself, letting YouTube know about that was fine, or would have been fine. But again, he had the goal and he stated, I don't think YouTube can fix this problem without violating my patent. And I wanted to fix this issue for the advertisers. I come from the old school media world, he says, and he specifically was like, well, I think if they try to fix this, they'll violate my patent. That's him trying to get his thing bought out. If he wanted to solve that problem, he could have made that an open source project if he's worried about the state of the world. He had the money to finance it one way or another to do it, to build the technology and to get a patent. That's very hard to do. And I'm not saying the man doesn't deserve to turn a profit. I'm saying that he then tried to leverage Google and YouTube. In my opinion, you could argue that that looks like what you might call a shakedown. I don't whatever. But when people found out, he started getting hate, and it was a problem. And again, I don't think people deserve to get doxxed or to have that kind of thing come their way. But I'm saying that it's understood that if you go after the livelihood of people, that they respond in such a manner. If you look to your history, your parents and grandparents can tell you that when unions organized and boycotted their jobs, that when new workers would come in, temp workers to fill those jobs, those people were called scabs, and people would attack those temporary workers, which is completely unreasonable and unfair, but that's just something with like a factory job or an assembly line job that people would attack people that they felt were affecting their livelihood. So when you think about it, it's not surprising that YouTubers and influencers would react in a similar fashion. There's a historical precedent for that in terms of what does someone do when their job is threatened? What does someone do when their income is threatened? How would they respond? And the thing is, that's a human response. That's a natural response. I don't think that it's right to harass anyone or to attack anyone, obviously. But I also say that there is a human behavioral thing that you cannot ignore with the fact that if someone feels they're backed into a corner, or that they're being threatened, or that something's being taken away from them, that a negative reaction is inevitable for the majority of people. And I think we can kind of understand that. So I think that the way that it was done. Punk Nugget. I don't need to talk about this regularly because my audience doesn't want me to necessarily talk about this regularly. I won't eventually be demonetized because there's no reason for me to be demonetized. And here's the other thing. I already told you. My YouTube ad revenue is 12 to 18% of my revenue. Most of my revenue comes from my independent business. And then in terms of YouTube revenue, I do better on affiliate marketing and on sponsorships by far. I honestly throw the YouTube ad money at taxes and savings, and I could just redirect, save less money, and pay the taxes out of revenue from the coaching side of things or from the brand deals. So, you know, to suggest that like, oh, I'm not going to talk about it, or I'm scared to talk about it, or blah, 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 blah. Like, you're a faceless, like, person hiding behind, like, the internet without a real name. So, like, I mean, you're, like, you know, spitting in the wind kind of here. So there isn't validity to what you're saying. Like, you know, like, I'm not scared of, like, YouTube isn't gonna, like, you know, like, hit me up because I'm talking about this, you know, like, that's not the way they operate. And the only reason that I'm doing the stream is because my audience asked for it, and I really don't think that, like, anyone here thinks that, like, because, I mean, I told you even what my quote-unquote agenda, if I had one, would be. There's not I put myself in a position to where this doesn't negatively affect me for the most part. I'm more concerned about how it affects people in my community and in my audience, you know, so that's, you know, like, that's where I'm going with it from. Because I already told you, like, if advertising gets cheaper, then I can buy ads that facilitate the growth of my other business, and I'll make more revenue by facilitating sales than I would ad revenue, right? So if ads get cheaper, that's in my best interest. So the thing is, an adpocalypse creates a situation in the market where ads could get cheaper. So that would be in my best interest, right? I don't want an adpocalypse, but it's not like I get downside mostly from that. That being said, other content creators and friends of mine would be negatively impacted, and the YouTube community as a whole would be negatively impacted, so I wouldn't want that, and that's why I wouldn't do it that way. That, and then let's look at it another way. I'm the least likely type of channel to be demonetized, and I'm the type of channel that has the highest kind of CPMs. So that wouldn't negatively impact me. On the ad revenue, I do on average $100 to $150 a day. To make up the difference of that revenue, I need one product sale more a day than I currently have. I could just buy advertising, or I could just market directly more to my audience, or I could just get more coaching clients and make, you know, 3 times more of that in a single call, or I could do a brand deal for exponentially more. There's not really, like, you know, there's not really a point in me having a motive, because I put myself in a position to where it'd be very hard for me to lose. And that's not a humble brag. I'm just pointing out that when I have an agenda, I tell you guys exactly what I'm going to get out of everything, because I would encourage you to do likewise. If I'm putting myself in that position, my point is, put yourself in that same situation that I'm in so that you are safe, like me. Put yourself in a position to be safe. I've never lived off the ad revenue because I think that that's dangerous. You know? So that's what I'm saying. Strumming Bird. As a small YouTuber myself, I feel the same. Wait, sorry, I lost your comment. Ugh. And we got some super chats, and I will address some of these super chats. Thank you, Janata Virgil. Thank you. So let's see. As a small... I lost it. I had somebody who was bringing up an issue that they were experiencing as a small YouTuber. Our Time says, is it not possible these companies are pulling out ads for other reasons? Appreciate all your insight on this. The negative press. It's the negative press. Dose of Dad says, so here's a better question. As a dad, I have my opinion on this, obviously, but do you think the best course for YouTube is to re-examine their policies where it involves kids in videos? So I'm concerned about that because of family vloggers and people who do innocent content. Someone in the viewing audience making lewd comments, somebody in the audience behaving badly, shouldn't hinder somebody who wants to share their family moments, or a young person on the internet shouldn't have to worry about that and about being targeted. Like, that punishes people who are innocent. And I think that's wildly unfair. The entire thing should come down on the people who are guilty. The people who are guilty are the only people who should have to worry about anything. And again, I don't know how we accomplish that, and that's ideal, sure, and that's easy to say, but it's hard to execute, right? So I'm sympathetic to the idea that if you made a family vlog, why should you be demonetized because of creepers in the comment section? That's unfair to you. That's not right. That's not justice. So why wouldn't that person's account just be banned and their IP address be banned? Like, that's something that I think is the wider issue on something like that. So I think that it's unfair to punish the innocent for what the audience or the viewer is doing. So Strungbear says, a small YouTuber myself, I feel that the same on how this won't affect my content. As a musician, I make content to make content for the love of it. No, that's great. That's amazing. What if creators stepped up and boycotted advertising on their channel 100% for a month to retaliate against this? I don't think that most people could survive that from a financial standpoint. I also don't think it accomplishes anything, because to what end? To what end? That's not going to make not enough content creators would do that, and then somebody will like break ranks and exploit that. And then I don't think it changes anything, because people just move their money or their attention elsewhere. LBS King Nova. Well, my dude, love how much would love... Wait, what? Lost the super chat. Sheesh. Would love some advice if you're ever in the future. I do appreciate the videos. Thanks for all the support. Yep. Thank you for covering this stuff. It does help us. Here's as a small creator. Okay, thank you. Andrew Can. Beanie Draws. Yep, absolutely. Families need education, so comments and time stamping, etc. There's a lot that, like, YouTube's trying to clean up the comments issue. They've been trying to do that for a lot of reasons. They've been doing it for extremism, racism, obviously, the stuff involving minors and children, extremism, it all comes back to individual responsibility and the simple fact that there are people who are evil in the world, and that we need to really address that somehow, some way. And the anonymity of the internet is facilitating the anonymity of the internet exists for a reason, to protect people and allow them to have a voice. That's being leveraged and taken advantage of for people to be willfully evil, malicious, and to escape consequences. Which, again, you don't want to punish the innocent for the guilty, but the situation becomes, if, at least in the first world, and in places where we have things like freedom of speech, if there wasn't internet anonymity, and if you were going to be directly tied to your internet avatar and alias, or you had to use a platform or to do anything, at least in like the United States, Canada, the UK, etc., then it means in those places, people wouldn't be able to do evil online and hide from consequences for doing so, because they would just not be able to participate in the online systems, because they would be tied to having an ID or a real name or a social security number or something like that. And again, I'm not proposing that that's what we should do. I'm talking this idea out that if everyone had to do like what me and other content creators do, where you put your real name and your real face out there, you would find that people are less likely to be evil because there will be consequences and because they can't hide from it. Now, I also understand there are privacy reasons and protections legitimately for people to not put their real name and real face out on the internet. Even if they're going to upload or participate in comments or do that. I understand that, and I respect that. I'm talking out loud, thinking through the process of, well, if that wasn't the case, well, what would happen? And what would happen is you would dramatically see a decrease in this type of thing. Because you wouldn't be able to get out of the consequences. I'm not saying that's what should happen. I'm saying that if I think it through, that would be the line of reasoning for going in that direction. And I don't know if we end up there. The thing is, we could eventually end up there. We could end up there as a result of things like this happening. And so, I don't know if it might be inevitable. It might be inevitable. But I also think that there's so much upside and value to being on the record, and everyone seems to want to be an influencer at this point. We might end up there naturally without people complaining. When Facebook and MySpace first started, like 15 years ago or whatever, I looked at that and I was watching the movie The Bourne Identity, and I was like, you just gave up a government dossier for free, and now they don't need a situation room of 10 people hunting down your known associates, the previous places you live, or even the coffee shop that you go to on a regular basis. There's no more need for spycraft and tradecraft. You just gave a public dossier on these every time you decide to opt into a social media platform, like Facebook or MySpace, with your real name to connect with your friends in college. That was the first thing that went through my mind 15 years ago, and because this stuff happened when I was like 20, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so I immediately believed that we were moving to a society where almost everyone was going to forfeit privacy entirely within my lifetime. And Gary Vee said that we'd all eventually just do the Truman Show and stream our lives. And that's happening. 10, 12 years ago, iJustine was doing 24-hour live streams on Justin TV. And so I think it was Justin Can who would found Twitch. So in the last decade, we moved to more people sharing their life in real time, streaming in real time, making a Truman Show, having people follow them around with a camera. That's a reality. It's not a movie idea anymore. We live in that world. So the idea that anonymity on the internet might disappear at some point, at least in the Western world, for a couple of reasons, either through the protections that would come with that, or just through the natural evolution of the narcissistic nature of society and consumerism and the desire for attention and acknowledgement that could happen within our lifetime, one way or another. It's interesting to think about. Again, I don't know how I feel about it, but it is interesting to think about. Again, I don't know if that'll be good or bad. I see it from an evolutionary standpoint. I grew up with you never putting your name on the internet and everybody using an alias and an avatar and virtual stuff, and no one put their real name out there. How quickly did that change, though, and what facilitated that change, and what was the motive behind that change? And the ability to monetize yourself as a personal brand has changed that. And so that's just weird to think about. Yonatan24 says YouTube should start suspending people's commenting privileges as warnings, 1 week suspensions. That could be interesting. The thing is, you then also have to still trust YouTube's algorithm to get it right. And then there becomes a conversation around freedom of speech and freedom of expression, although you could argue for them being a private company and private corporation. There will be people who are wildly sensitive to that and the censoring, and the idea that, protecting children, again, it could be seen as that being a net positive. Some people would think of it as possibly an excuse or a narrative to suppress speech or expression. So that's a slippery slope, and I don't think most people want YouTube to do that. But again, I don't know. But it's interesting that you brought that up, because if something like that were to be the system, it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me. Uniweb says, I think we've gone away from being afraid of being noticed to needing to be noticed as connected as people, and it's awakening of conscience, in my opinion. That's interesting. Uncle Dan says, never give your real name on the internet. Never meet someone from the internet. Never get in a stranger's car and then Uber. That's weird. You're right. Think about it. We got from those basic rules, never give your real name on the internet, never meet anyone from the internet, and never, that was the basic rules of the internet 20 years ago. And now, we do the opposite of that. We do the complete opposite. Every single one of us. That's so weird. The Blocks fam says, I want to say thank you throughout the years. Your content has helped a lot of us, most recently being that we got monetized in our gaming channel, so thank you very much. Excellent, The Blocks fam. Glad you're up and running. Roberto, trainer tips and as a Pokemon channel. I'm familiar with him. Nick from Trainer Tips, and got his whole account deleted because it had CP, which is combat power, in his title, and I guess YouTube thought it stood for, obviously, yes. So, that I believe YouTube is working to restore his channel. I think that they're aware of it, and that was a glitch in the system. But then, again, people are trying to paint a narrative that YouTube doesn't care about child exploitation, yet they deleted channels accidentally that weren't doing that on the off chance that they might be doing that. Punk Nugget, I agree with you. Because, not knowing what could trigger that suspension, the comments, seems unreasonable. So, YouTube hasn't gotten their systems on anything so perfect as to allow me to feel confident that that's a good solution. So, I would be worried about that. Beanie Draw says, they got it up and running after 12 hours. Okay, cool. Which sucks, though, because I know that, to be real with you, for the views that Nick from Trainer Tips gets, he probably lost about $2,000 or $3,000 or more the entire time his channel was down. I think that Nick lost somewhere between $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 the entire time his channel was down for that false flag issue. Nick says, Roberto, your name is mentioned in the Verge article. Someone else pointed that out to me, which is really cool. Dose of Dad says that private businesses and the private sector mean you're entitled to nothing. Yeah, I tend to usually agree with that as a capitalist, so yeah. Yanada says YouTube needs to be the least wrong in every decision they make, and that's really hard to do. I agree. And Nick says, Nick said that in the grand scheme of things, my channel was down for 12 hours, and it's the least of our concerns in the bigger picture. I'd agree with that. So yeah, I think that what you're seeing happen with this YouTube Adpocalypse situation is that YouTubers do want awareness of the issues with child exploitation on the platform resolved and taken care of. What they don't want is bad actors leveraging this to the detriment of the innocent people in the content creator community. I mean, imagine that you're not a YouTuber, right? Imagine that for whatever reason, this happened and it affected your job, and your boss is like, well, I know you didn't do anything wrong, but the media ran with this story, and everybody here lost 10% of their paycheck. Now, in the comments, I want you to react to the idea that you lost 10% of your paycheck or 20% of your paycheck because of an article that had nothing to do with anything you did. How would you feel? How would you respond? how would you act if that were the case? If you did nothing, but because of an article, your company lost a contract and you lost 20% of your income, how would you feel about that? And by the way, that can happen for companies. Companies could have shareholders in companies could do nothing wrong and lose millions of dollars or thousands of dollars because of some controversy and they had nothing to do with it and they lost money. People who are employees of contract companies, if the company loses its best account because of something they had nothing to do with, they would be wildly upset and they'd be justified in having that reaction. Roberta Clovertack says, "Hey Clover, I'm a youth shooting sports coach. Would videos showing that stuff be considered child exploitation rather than youth education? Have done very few of those with my videos." No, they wouldn't be, because what we're talking about would be direct violence against children or anything that puts children in a compromising situation, or anything like that. So I don't think that your channel would be caught in that. I think, though, if YouTube is just stricter on everything, that your channel would be negatively impacted. Here is a worst case scenario, really, for a likely worst case scenario. Because here's one of the problems is, when Matt brought this up, he brought up the recommendations algorithm of how if you watch something enough times, you're only recommended that content. That's normal for anything YouTube. If you've watched enough YouTube, you kind of know that that's how it works. Here's what I think would happen in terms of this wormhole of the child exploitation content. If YouTube leans on that side rather than the existence of the content and the profiles and the accounts and things of that nature, what would happen is you guys could see a dip in traffic from recommended. If YouTube tweaks the recommendations algorithm, you could get less views. And for a lot of you, less views means less ad revenue, less leverage in negotiating brand deals, etc., etc. So you would see a dip in views. Most YouTubers that want massive views get it from recommendations and from the homepage. I try to rely on YouTube search more myself because the nature of my content is that. Not everybody is that. If you're an entertainer, you can't really use YouTube search that much if you're an entertainer unless your name is what's being searched. So I sympathize from that standpoint. For me, I think that if they tweak recommended, that would hurt the majority of the largest content creators. I think it would hurt up-and-coming creators and creators in the YouTube middle class. So that's my thought on if they change the algorithm in an attempt to deal with this. It'll be the recommended and suggested, and that would be problematic for a lot of people. Again, I would not really be affected dramatically by that because of the nature of the content that I do, which means that search would be a stronger thing because search is intent, and that can then be tied to the responsibility of the user. And then, so again, it's another situation where I potentially benefit from the outcome in the worst case scenario. And again, I don't like continuing to bring that up. I just keep wanting to clarify that no matter what they do, I'm like, okay, I would rather that they deal with this problem and fix this problem. I'd rather that there's the minimal amount of collateral damage, but understand that I will probably get the least shrapnel in the situation. The only thing that I'm worried about is anything I've said about all of this being taken out of context because of how YouTubers are framed in the media historically. And I think that there are a lot of people who are like, oh, it's disappointing maybe that the YouTuber's first thought is to defend their income. It's like, why wouldn't that be YouTubers' first thought? They aren't participating in child exploitation. They aren't watching that content. They aren't uploading it. They aren't facilitating it. Why wouldn't their first instinct be, how does this negatively impact me after? Because it's obvious that the first thought is, that's horrible, but now that this horrible thing that I don't do and participate in, that should be addressed, why am I having consequences for it? I mean, let me ask you guys in the comment section. Do you think it's unfair or unreasonable that YouTube content creators are more concerned about how this impacts them, considering they did nothing wrong. Like, you know, because, I mean, I think that everyone agrees that this is horrible. I just don't think everyone agrees that they should suffer as a result of it, or that they should shut up and accept that there's negative consequences for them. Like, why should they shut up about that? Like, you know, why should they not be upset? You know, like I said, all of you agree that if your livelihood, through no fault of your own, went away or was threatened, or you saw a direct loss of your income, even to the tune of 10 or 20%, that you would be angry and you would be vocal about it because, yes, that's horrible and I had nothing to do with it. You know? So, I mean, I think that's... Captain Moonbeam says that would certainly be the first concern of legacy media outlets. I would say that's probably true. Blaine Fiasco, Pewds didn't cause the first Adpocalypse. I know that's taken out of context by people. People even think I blame him for that, and like, no. The media ran with a narrative, and they had a news cycle because they just kind of had this taking him out of context gotcha moment, and they had a negative news cycle around YouTube, and they got to have yet another negative news cycle around YouTube 6 weeks later. Like, and it was in their best interest for multiple reasons. So yeah, that is, yeah, that's, you know, it was never PewDiePie's fault that the Adpocalypse happened. It was a precursor to a predictable outcome. It was leveraged, but, you know, the media doing hatchet jobs on YouTubers is nothing new. It was disproportionate. And it was a segue into a larger negative narrative. Our Time says, similar situation, Toronto County last week, there was an Amber Alert child missing. Emergency lines got hate calls for waking people up. They were tied up and couldn't deal with that issue. See, that's like one of those negative, unreasonable things that, like, the problem or the way people handle it create other problems. I'm not saying there shouldn't, like, obviously there should be an Amber Alert, but then the response and backlash meant that now emergency services were tied up because people were agitated, like, but that was on people responding to that negatively in the wrong way. Similar situation, but different in the sense that there's this horrible issue, but now because people are responding to it the wrong way, there's going to be other horrible things that probably come from that for everybody. And that's, like, weird to think, like, wow, how is this a controversial issue that everyone isn't 1,000% on the same page of? Because the thing is, I think most people are on 1,000% the page, because I know I am, that this is horrible, YouTube needs to fix it. What I don't understand is what the advertisers think they get out of pulling ads, and I think that's obvious. Well, the media is going to say YouTube is horrible, so we shouldn't be on YouTube. But, you know, but that's just how outrage culture is right now. People pulling ads from TV or news programs because they don't want to be associated with what someone said. But here's what always happens. Give it 2 or 3 months, and they come back. Everybody who boycotted, what was it? I don't remember which Fox News host it was. It might have been any or all of them. It's always something where people are boycotting Fox News host. But those advertisers all came back within like a month, right? Or 2 months. Like, someone in the comments probably knows better than me on this, because I don't even watch the news anymore. I watch Philip DeFranco. Like, but I think that's my understanding, is that every time there's people boycotted Nike, and Nike's stock went up. Like, I don't understand how that does anything. Like, I mean, aside from, in this case, the net collateral damage is to content creators who haven't diversified their income. So that seems, again, unreasonable. Alicorn Sisters, if you don't understand the issue, I've linked to several articles in the description that can bring you up to speed. Yeah, people, the mainstream media is probably having a field day. Yeah, it seems that way. So, yeah, it is what it is. But like I said, these are just kind of some of my thoughts surrounding, the issue right now. And I appreciate you guys tuning in. Let me acknowledge the super chats we got. So we had new members, Why Not Way, designed on purpose, awesome, and DSLR Chronicles, glad to see you back live, Roberto. Get those likes up, folks. Human Rights in Daily Life, $20 super chat, just because I'm a great help. Thank you so much. LBS Kings, $2, thank you. New member, Midnight Rider TV, thank you. Janata Virgil, $4, thank you. And LBS Nova Kings, another $5 super chat. Well, much love, man. Hope some advice in the future. Appreciate your videos. Thanks for the support. Yeah, thank you so much, man. So yeah, so I think that's where I'm going to end it today. I'm going to catch up on some things. There's some video content I want to edit for tomorrow. I might shoot some stuff this evening if I'm not tired after dinner. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in for this live stream. I know I don't live stream that often. Like I said, my plan was to redesign and overhaul my entire live stream setup. Thank you, Andy Rakotamala. I think I'm pronouncing that right. So yeah, thank you. Yeah. So I think that ultimately my plan before this particular incident came up and I wanted to address it, my original plan was to try to dramatically improve my overall live streaming setup and to get that up and running, and then change that out. And that's the general idea. New graphics, new everything, new theme music, and that was the plan. But then this happened, and I'm like, well, let me just cover it in a live stream. Let me give my unfiltered thoughts, because I felt like if I record something about this right now, I'm going to have to edit it down for time, and I kind of want to have an organic conversation about it, and I want to think without like having to like chop things up or this or that or mince words. So I wanted to just kind of give you guys my thoughts and opinions and where I stand on all of this. And like I said, I think that YouTube needs to address this problem, and I think they are, and I think that they're doing it the best way they know how, because it's a logistics problem. And I also think that while people might be disappointed that YouTubers are like, oh, well, what's going to happen to us? I'm like, I think that that's a normal human response. And the thing is, then say you're disappointed in humanity, because everybody will respond that way in a situation that directly impacts them where they are an innocent party. And that doesn't mean that they're okay with what's happening. It means that they think that that's horrible, and they think that they shouldn't have to be punished as a result of what other horrible people do, which is not the most unreasonable thing in the world to think. I also think that, again, Matt Watson, I don't understand what his motives or intent was beyond harming YouTube, and then inadvertently content creators by specifically in his call to action asking people to hit up the advertisers, because I can't imagine that makes sense versus informing YouTube, informing the commentary community, informing the YouTube news channels, informing the authorities, the FBI, Before informing advertisers, why wouldn't you inform Child Protective Services, the FBI, and law enforcement? That is the thing that a reasonable person would do, in my opinion. In my opinion, in this YouTube Adpocalypse, YouTube wake up situation, why not specifically have the call to action be alerting the authorities and the platform? Why the advertisers? Unless you specifically want to hurt YouTube and then by proxy content creators, why do that? And again, when the news cycle is over, the advertisers will come back like they always do. So, but it's a matter of, in the interim, there are creators who might suffer, and the thing is, yeah, the advertisers will come back, but if the algorithm changes again, how y'all feel about that YouTube algorithm changing again? Dramatically, this time. How do you feel about recommended views being down by 40%? If that happens. That's, like I said, I'll just lean into YouTube search like I always do, and I'll just monetize the channel outside of YouTube like I always do, and I'll lean heavily into the podcast. God forbid anything happened to YouTube, guys, I would just do daily podcast, and I would probably simulcast doing live to tape and do it on Twitch or something. I've always got an exit strategy for this type of thing because I've been around long enough to understand that I'm not going to make myself beholden to anybody. And that's kind of the lesson that I hope people learn from this entire situation. I think that people got scared during the first and second and third and fourth Adpocalypse, and I think that this time it's going to stick and they're going to realize, I might need to diversify. So, that's kind of where I'm going with it, and that's kind of where my thought process is. LeBaron, how are you, man? Yeah. So, like I said, links, law of attraction. I'm not happy about this at all. I'm just saying that I've figured out a lot over the years about this kind of stuff, and I've been around long enough to say, that's a possibility. What's my contingency plan? What's my exit strategy? What do I do if ... happens that's outside of my control? I'm not happy about anything, regarding this situation. But I am in a position where I've made myself as insulated from it as possible. So, I'm not happy about it. Why would I be happy about it? I mean, I've told you what I would do. I told you what, where the ups and downs are for me with this kind of thing. And I've just, kind of put that out there and put it on the record. And again, links are in the description below for the news articles regarding this. So, for me, it's just a matter of practicality. It's just, it's a matter of practicality. So that's where, I stand on it. And again, I think horrible people will always find ways to do horrible things. I think that you can only regulate that so much before you start treading on things like freedom of speech. Like, horrible people will do horrible things. You start treading on freedom of speech and property rights if you try too hard to regulate that sort of thing or to prevent that thing. That becomes dangerous. So, that's what I think a lot of people have legitimate concerns about that issue. Claudio asks, do I think a channel only uploading how-tos around programming can still work in 2019? Yeah, it's an underrepresented niche. I would definitely say it could still work. Strawberry Lolly says, hi from Tokyo. Thanks for your insight. 200 yen, which is about $2 US. Thank you so much. Appreciate the donation. Yeah. So, I agree with Uniweb that this could, depending on what they do. Small YouTubers may not be affected by this We'll see what happens in the long run. I will be curious to what happens as we close out Q1 and what happens in the beginning of Q2 with regard to ad revenue, and that's what I'm going to look at. And I've got a lot of YouTube creators who are willing to be honest with me about their AdSense earnings and whether this affects them. So, because they'll DM me, I have open DMs, so like people will be telling me if this starts to affect their ad revenue, and they'll be very vocal about it, I'm sure. So we'll be monitoring the situation, and I'll try and keep you guys posted. But so far, we've got some major brands that contribute massive budgets pulling out, and we'll see how that impacts things next month and over the next quarter. But I think it'll also be an incentive for people to do more brand deals and to push their merchandise or their products more. So we'll see where all of this goes. But anyway, thanks for joining the stream. For the new people, if you want to catch up, you'll be able to watch the replay with the link. Also, you can look at the articles down below to get a sense of the situation. All right, you guys, that's it. I'm out. Stay awesome, and I will catch you guys again when I've fixed the new live streaming setup and rebranded everything. All right, take care.